Welcome to yesterday's Goo, a conversation with Jenny Zhang. This event is presented by Liminal in partnership with the Wheeler Centre as part of the inaugural Liminal Festival. So to begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm currently broadcasting from the land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I've been thinking about writing in the context of Jenny's practice and my practice as a form of exploration, expression, and ultimate intimacy. So beyond this, I believe in writing's potential to disrupt the individualistic and oppressive logic of the colonial state. I acknowledge that writing, storytelling, and conversation are all traditions that have long been embedded in these lands, and their roles in resisting the ongoing colonial project of so-called Australia. Today we pay respect to all elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people this conversation may reach. I just also want to acknowledge that Jenny is broadcasting to us from other ancestral lands, the lands of the Lenape Poking, of the Lenape peoples, which settlers call New York City. I also know that I cannot acknowledge country and ancestral land today without expressing solidarity with Palestine as it resists the violent occupation of Israel's genocidal campaign. Free Palestine, may we never grow numb to injustice, always was, always will be, from the river to the sea. So I'm Panda Wong. I'm a poet and editor based in Nam, and also an admin pig. With me today is Jenny Zhang, a writer, poet, and essayist born in Shanghai and raised in New York. She's the author of a chapbook called Hags, 2 poetry collections, Dear Jenny, We Are All Find, and My Baby First Birthday, and the short story collection Sour Heart. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for joining us today. We thought we might start with reading a poem each, so did you want to start, Jenny?
Sure. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Let's see. This is called It Is Finally Midsummer. Butterflies with translucent orange wings make kissy faces at my half-liquid turd. The only reason I shat in the grass is because I feel combative and entitled. I would seek romance at every turn, but I'm too entitled. I know these 2 notorious hags who give the greatest blowjobs. Their cowabungy promises make me shit blood so sharp I cut lesions through the piston flower beds. The jungle floor sings so sweetly. The animal kingdom grows greener and greener. At least 10% goes to a charity that endeavors to put an end to the funding of more charities. My God, someone listen to someone and make a decision about anything already. Some hags tell their own story, and I wish a different type of person could be moved by what moves me. I don't want to admit what I see in the million refracting weird little cries actually gives me hope. My errant blood turd finally on its way. I feel free and bad not watching the videos my mom sends me from Winchester City. I feel bad when I see she's liked her own Facebook status. Free when I see her looking beautiful under the cold, shadowless light of midday. And I know there is a witness for everything. A type of submerged expectation that spoils. Don't tell me your gash drips like mine. Don't tell me it could have been your son. Don't tell me you aren't sleeping well at night. Don't tell me you felt the weight of hopelessness like a millstone dragging holes through the floorboards. Don't tell me it was senseless. Don't let your sadness come naturally. Don't cry when I'm not ready to yet. Don't make me think you know exactly what I know, that if it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. You cannot be one of us. I am not even one of us. And if I expected someone here to understand, then I'm just as stupid as I thought I was.
Thank you so much. I really identify with that feeling of feeling guilty when my mom likes her own Facebook post and I haven't. I'm going to read Pork Lullaby. Yeah. For context, Jenny gave me some really amazing notes on this poem, and I'm also wearing pig earrings today to commemorate Pork Lullaby. Pork Lullaby. If you feed me garbage, I will sing a song of garbage. Pig Song by Margaret Atwood. To be a pig is to know the word crush. Miss Piggy's eternally unrequited crush on emotionally unavailable Kermit. Neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet. Matthew 7:6. Common cause of neonatal piggy death. Sows rolling over in their sleep. Long histories of breeding for feeding means that, like cliffside mansions in the Anthropocene, the organs are prone to collapse. Speaking of organs, how fast do you think those little ham hock hearts were beating when those two hogs mugged infamous tax-evading, hip-shaking Shakira in a public park? Speaking of hearts, I cut open a pig heart in Year 5 biology. Its pinkness, its pipes, its precious parts, the closest to ours out of every living thing in the world. Speaking of the world, I'm thinking about how pigs see it. Dichromatic vision pouring out from their eyes, solidifying objects as pure color. For example, they may see the blue of the sky as white expanse, but not any clouds or rainbows it may hold. Well-known industry fact: stress before slaughter can make pig flesh DFD, dark, firm, dry. An AI pig farm in China plays ambient mix on loop to captive porcine audience to oink oink optimize how their bodies feel against our teeth. In opposition to its name, tenderizing is a brutal act. Who else has ever seen a tenderizer and thought, medieval torture device? We are always oink oink optimizing our own tender meat. I'm the same age as the word biohacking, have submitted myself to the indignities of Pilates, sheet masks made from boiled bones, and first dates with men who swore by intermittent fasting. Lifestyle guru gives himself resveratrol-induced shits in the pursuit of endurance. Something so spiritual about shitting yourself towards transcendence, the slop sublime. I'm watching a video of Lotus, Piggy Sweetie rescued from a life as dog bait. She carefully gathers flowers to decorate her home, and in this way, the poem can be a pigsty. At a farm animal sanctuary, I'm learning about how we've made pigs pink out of a preference for light-skinned meat, and how being under the sky and the sun burns their skin to a bacon crisp, and their bodies are mighty, meaty odes to multitasking. A dead pig is beating ham, sticky heart, brined glue, but an alive pig roots in the soil, turning it over with its snout, softening the ground. Is this a hymn? Cool.
I'm so glad you read that.
I thought it would be nice to read it because I think you played a big influence on that poem for me. I guess in the context of the event title, Yesterday's Goo, and thinking, I guess, about excretions and the abject and the disgusting, one thing I really love about your work is the relationship between like the abject and humor. Like, I feel like a friend once said to me, there'll never be anything funnier than like poo. And it feels like that's a sentiment that kind of crops up in your work. So I guess to kick things off, do you maybe want to speak to the relationship between the abject and humor in your work?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm First of all, I'm so glad I got to hear your poem, and it was really touching for me to read your poem, and it is very funny and very sweet, and it's a classic entry in the poetics of swinology, as we talked about when I first encountered your poem. And I feel the same way about your work, as far as the abject and humor. Well, I don't know. I just think the toilet is the best thing that exists. Um, it's incredible to have toilets, first of all, to use as human beings. But also the toilet as like, I don't know, as a metaphor. This is not like a very like intellectual thought, but I remember watching Batman Returns when I was like a kid. Have you seen that movie?
I actually feel like I have, but it's one of those movies that has passed through the sieve of my mind.
Yeah. Danny DeVito does a really great job playing the Penguin, and Michael Keaton at the beginning of the movie, he like goes through the underworld to go meet the Penguin for the first time, and I just remember Danny DeVito as the Penguin. He like says to, no, I'm wrong, not Michael Keaton, but the mayor of Gotham, who's played by someone whose name I can't remember now, but he's like an iconic actor. He tells the Penguin tells the mayor of Gotham City, he's like, what you place on your mantle. Oh no, he says something that's like what you flush down your toilet. That's what it is. The Penguin says to the mayor of Gotham City, "What you flush down your toilet, I put on my mantle." And I remember being like, very long-winded way of getting to this, but I remember being like 9 years old. And I didn't really understand what he meant because I didn't even know what a mantle was, first of all. I hadn't seen like houses with them before, but eventually, I think through like consulting Webster's dictionary, I understood that it was like a place to put prized objects for other people to see. And I didn't really understand what the Penguin was saying, but I had this idea of like he had been abandoned and unwanted and deemed as like a freak, as some sort of abject creature who was unworthy of love, and that he was like in his own twisted, violent way, like reclaiming the abject as something worthy, and that all the stuff that people flush away that goes to the sewers, that's where he lives. And I thought it was like really funny and, campy. I wouldn't have known that word back then. But I guess I just always feel like there is something really true about like for every item, everything that someone might flush, metaphorically, physically, or otherwise, it is of like great value and pleasure to someone else. And I always thought that was kind of like cool and funny.
Yeah, as you were saying, I guess what you flush down the toilet ends up on my mantle. I was thinking about, are you familiar with, I think it's called is it the Fatbergs that they have in London? Are you familiar with this?
No, what is
It's
that?
it's like a accumulation of like everyone's waste, and it's kind of aggregated into this huge like monstrous beast that is like clogging up parts of like the London sewers. And I think I've long been fascinated with the sewers since I heard about the story, because I guess it's that realization that there's like this whole world underneath us and that the things we throw away have a life after us. And they also kind of, I was like, it's kind of that thing where there's like a weird togetherness in how they all gather after we throw them away that I find really intimate and beautiful. Yeah, sorry for the tangent. I was just like
Totally.
thinking I need to tell Jenny about the Fatberg because it's also such an amazing name.
But it's so, I love that you bring it up. And I feel like you do this in your poetry too, where you're interested in everything and everything can be a treasure and a gem. And I think like this is another, maybe quite basic thought, but there's like a way that like the earth takes care of refuse of stuff that is, of like of a carcass of decay. There's like a way in which there's like a system that I guess you could say has worked for this earth for as long as it has. But then there's this like human notion of like garbage, of trash, of like something that needs to be gotten rid of. But there isn't really like a way to get rid of things. Like there's always someone who is like the steward of what no one wants. And I guess it's also what you were saying. I don't know. It's just a fascination with being interested in everything and seeing a value in everything that maybe, I don't know, is also part of the abject and the gooey and the sludge of everything that goes into poetry as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I thank you for saying that. I feel like one of the notes that I wrote when going back through your old work was I wrote that it feels like excretions and this like intense comfort that you have with talking about them. I went back and read Hags and I was like making notes of all the moments of, I guess, disgustingness and abjectness. And I was like, there's like slops of vomit, pissing contests, crop dusting near white men, astronaut diapers. It's kind of just like this whole spectrum of the disgusting that just feels so comfortable. And I guess that relates to what you were saying about how actually the disgusting is just part of like, I guess, the cycle of the world and of life. And it kind of makes me think about like what is actually truly disgusting. Because I'm like, oh, and a lot of refuse and garbage is also was once part of us. And it's funny how, and I guess that's the abject. It's like once it's not part of us anymore, it's disgusting. But I guess it's nice to think about that we were once home to these things that we find disgusting now. I guess like moving on that line of thought and also thinking about my earlier engagement with your work, I kind of, I guess, asked a version of this question when you were at the Wheeler Center actually quite a number of years ago. And I was sick and I sent a friend in proxy to ask this question because I also like love the way you use poo in your work and I think one of the things I found when I was doing a bit of research for this interview was that someone has once described you as profoundly scatological, which is such a cool description, I think. So I think, I guess the version of a question that I asked was, I guess, I feel like poo and intimacy are just like really closely interlinked in your work. Like, even with the poem you read earlier. And I guess, how do you feel about that interpretation of, I guess, poo, shit, feces, whatever, like, it feels like, it feels like you see that process as, I think about it's an externalization of what goes into your body, and knowing someone's, I guess, bowel movements is maybe like a form of intimacy. And
Yeah, totally. I remember when I was a student, getting my MFA, my master's degree in fiction, there would be like a day where you have to submit your stories, and they would like at my school print enough copies so that all the students could pick up the stories for each week. And I had this one classmate, he'd always like pick up my story and do a flip, and he'd be like, there it is, that there's the shitting, there's the scatological elements, not a Jenny Zhang story without it. And I do remember feeling very like proud at the time, but I also think I felt very like this sort of preemptive desire to legitimize like scatological writing as a high literary form of writing, and that like James Joyce was scatological and Mozart was scatological, and all these sort of highly decorated artistic men in history. And now I'm trying to I don't feel that same urgency, I suppose, but I, I think there's like very simple, basic reasons to be interested in poop, which is just that why wouldn't you be? You should be interested in everything that your body does. I'm interested in my breathing. I'm interested in how I sleep. I'm interested in how people eat, how people shit. Um, it's just interesting. And I'm interested in things that, I always thought like why is burping somehow better than farting? If you had to choose one, like no one's like, oops, like I just farted really bad. Like, but someone might be like, oh, sorry, I belched. And I always was fascinated that shitting was sort of the ultimate disgusting act. And I'm also like year of the pig, which is why I love. um, I love anything about pigs, but I feel like pigs are seen as so lowly, right? Because of their relationship with their shit. Anyway, this is all to say that I came from a family that was very, very concerned about eating, very, very concerned about famine, very, very concerned about access to food for, various reasons that preceded my existence. And it's just natural if you're concerned about what goes inside of you to be concerned about what comes out of you. So it just felt very like natural to write about all this stuff. I didn't really think about it. And it is just, it is very intimate. Like, when you have a baby, it's all about eating and shitting. It's like, are they eating well and are they shitting well? Um, and I just always thought like, and I have a cat now too, so I'm like literally in the same room as her litter box right now, and I didn't have time to clean it. So her scent is definitely all around me. But it's like nothing about her can disgust me. Like even when it's disgusting, I'm not disgusted. And I think that is like the deepest marker of intimacy. I don't know.
I really relate to I actually did write a note. I was like pet ownership, intimate knowledge of bowel movements, because I was like, Jenny has a cat. And I was like, I write a lot about my dog and her bowel movements, because I kind of think the moment I realized I had a love for my dog that I hadn't experienced before was when I realized I knew exactly like the things she would do before taking a shit. And I was like, I just know the choreography of this, and I just like know when it's going to happen. And I was like, I was like, it's so, I don't think I've ever seen anything else's butthole in such like detail and context. So anyways, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like such a primal knowledge. And I feel like, in all the ancient knowledges, there must have been people who were really prized for their knowledge on bowel movements and just like shit. And maybe we've lost that in our hyper sanitization of the modern day. But,
Totally.
and I was also thinking, I guess, what you said about like, having a family that's preoccupied with eating and what goes in must come out. So that, I guess, mutual fascination with both those processes. And I guess in terms of your work as well, I've been thinking about how scatological it is and maybe how profane it is. It kind of feels in some ways like, I guess, a resistance to kind of this like sanitized like model migrant story, because so much of, I guess, what the white gaze views as migrant writing is so much about food, because like, food is great, but it feels like the easiest terrain to connect on. And I guess, and I've just been thinking, I don't have any fully formed thoughts. They're still digesting, but I guess I've just been thinking about the scatological and the really disgusting as an inversion of what is acceptable about migrants, which is food when you're quiet, when you're like, performing like a government funded like cultural activities. And then you have this stuff where it's like, well, actually migrants love to talk about poo, but that's maybe not, that doesn't fit the narrative of that.
Totally. I think there's such, and I feel like it's going to sound like I'm totally talking shit about this kind of writing, which I think has a lot of value and a lot of beauty. But there's that cliche of like migrant literature where it's just fragrant heaps of dishes and food as like, you know, a metaphor for care in sort of a poem or a story or, you know, an essay where perhaps like the parental figures are unable to provide other forms of physical or verbal care, but they do it through
Mm,
feeding, which is a totally, totally, totally valid and also beautiful way of writing. But I have found, maybe this is similar to along the lines of what you're saying, that that is so welcomed and so that kind of writing it's so encouraged or like
mm,
the cliche and I'm totally gonna sound like I'm shitting on someone of like the distant and emotionally unavailable parent whose act of love is like leaving a piece of cut ripe mango on like the kitchen countertop before they go to their 18-hour
mm.
you know day job. Like these become tropes, not by any fault of the writer, but I think because there is such, yeah, this, it is so acceptable and so encouraged in a way that it sometimes can lose power. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. Like, I agree with you in the sense that I think that writing is really beautiful and valid, but it's not about the writer and their experience so much as in, I guess, the way that the white gaze kind of flattens it out and kind of it's just held up as something totally digestible for the white gaze without maybe thinking about, I guess, the complexities of existing as a migrant very far from your home on stolen lands a lot of the time. Yeah, I'm
Totally.
totally not shitting on that kind of writing. I'm also like hyper aware of how many times the word shit has been used in this conversation. But
I know. And I'm also going to say I've totally written stuff like that, I'm sure, a million times. But maybe that's also why I love humor so much. It's just such an intervention to perhaps like the endless appetite of like the dominant, you know, white gaze consumer that the endless appetite for sorrow, for trauma, for seriousness, for humorlessness, for stillness, for quietness, for subtlety that is almost utterly still and without movement. I think humor is like a beautiful and wonderful tool at our disposal.
and I also think, because I guess another thing for me about your work is how is like the figures of parents and like migrant parents as these like incredibly funny and like really rich individuals whose like I guess fullness is kind of maybe not seen by I guess white gaze or whatever, and I kind of love it's really hard because I guess a lot of the times it can feel like migrant parents can be kind of shrouded in this kind of like sanctity, like, you know, they've worked really hard to build this like great life for themselves, but they're also, which is, you know, a lot of the time true, but they're also incredibly funny, incredibly smart. Like, I don't know anyone funnier than my Asian mom. Do you know what I mean? And I get the sense from your work, and also the fact that, you know, I feel like you've mentioned, I think your poetry collections, Dear Jenny, We Are All Fine, and My Baby First Birthday, actually, those titles come from your mother. And I kind of maybe want to talk about, I guess, typos and like incorrect English as a kind of excretion or leakage, like, you know, something that slips out and kind of makes language new. I guess maybe the poetics of typos.
Um, yeah. I have been very inspired by my mom and my family in particular. I'm also in some ways I am limited and bound by my own experience, having my own experience of immigrating to a country and having parents who are not from the country that we currently live in. And my particular experience is like that my mom has this like totally unstoppable, voracious capacity to express herself. And she's very cute and funny. And not cute in that patronizing way that sometimes I see happen. Like there have been a few times where she's come to events of mine and, they're sort of the literary audience is a very like white, upper class, sort of cultured audience. And they always come up to me and they're like, oh my God, are those your parents? They're so cute. And I always feel very like grossed out by that. Because I'm like, they are, but I don't think in the way that you mean it. Because she's very clever. She's not cute by accident, but she is also cute by accident. And I just always thought that um, it's so bounded by power too, right? Like what kind of quote unquote accents are sophisticated and sort of alluring, what kind of mistakes indicate some, sort of um I don't know, like if you have like a, maybe like a European accent, there are ways in which the mistakes and such can seem really can be given this great birth of like um, just alluringness and it can just be very sexy
Yeah.
to people when someone has a certain kind of accent. And then when someone else has another kind of accent from like anywhere essentially in the global south, instantly they are seen as just a little bit dumber than they are. I know that is like changing and people have awareness of that, but I always thought that was really unfair. And I always thought that someone coming to a language late in life has such like enormous, what is the word that I want to say? You bring the gaps in knowledge when you are a language learner late in life are just so tremendously like electric with potential because everything that is untranslatable is like I want to say like it's like the content of like the human condition, which is also inexpressible. I'm like going all over the place now, but I just feel like the things that my mom said incorrectly or wrongly were some of the most brilliant things I'd ever heard. And to be more specific, my first collection of poetry was called Dear Jenny, We Are All Fine. And it was because she would write me these emails where she would be like, how are you? We are all fine. And I thought it was like a great concept of being fine rather than fine. And I never felt fine. And I loved the idea that you could feel fine. It sort of was this mistake that electrified my brain. And I thought that's what poetry is. It's finding a way to use words that is not normal and not correct. And because of it, it electrifies everything. It re-electrifies a word. It re-electrifies a string of words. The negative space in poetry is electric. And I just felt like it was unfair that only certain ways of saying words wrong could be considered artistic or poetic. So I just wanted to bring, yeah, my mom's way of speaking into it. And not just my way of speaking, but my way of speaking. I don't know if you feel this at all, but sometimes, even though English is technically my my best language, I
Mm-hmm.
don't like know certain phrases. Like I didn't know for a long time the phrase like for all intents and purposes. I thought it was for all intensive purposes. And I always thought like, oh, maybe I don't know these phrases because I didn't grow up around people who these phrases were native to them. So they don't use these phrases. But then I
Mm.
started to really enjoy that I got all these phrases wrong. And I felt like it helped me along as a creative person, to not have a sense of like restriction and hard and fast rules about certain things. I've really gone all over the
No, I
place
love
today
it.
in this.
Um, it's because I'm like poetry is, I guess one of the elements of poetry is about having a like loose and like leaky relationship to language. Like I guess if you have a rigid relationship to language, poetry is about looking at language in a new light. And I kind of think that about typos. I guess maybe to share one of my mom's most profound typos or missayings to me is whenever she types the word sauce, like tomato sauce, she always writes it like source, source. And I'm always like, it's so weird that you're just asking me where the tomato sauce is, but to me, it's like you're asking about where the origin of tomatoes is. And I'm like, there's something, I think I'm also in a bit of a woo woo mood lately, but I was like, wow, there's a lot of goddishness in that. Like I was like, you just like have instilled the divine into tomato sauce, and you don't,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's just like you expressing yourself in the way you always have. And when I was a child, I knew 3 languages, and now I only know one, and I feel that
No
loss
way.
every day, and I feel it so much when I speak to my mom. So it's kind of, I find those typos like, I guess, what am I trying to say? I feel like they're a way of like language trying to like reach me, but through my mom. And then the way that they come out is so unexpected that it just makes such a mark in my mind. And yeah,
I love that.
I think poetry has a way of finding people as well. Like I think it's a reciprocal relationship, and I don't think you just sit down and write it. I think it comes to you through, I don't know, living your life and noticing things.
Totally. And language has never been a total and complete way to express anything. I mean, that becomes clear every time we say something to someone, and almost for certain, the recipient of what we've said the thing to does not understand exactly what we meant by that. They understood it through, you know, the intervention of their entire being. And I just think maybe also that becomes even more clear and even more obvious when people are not native speakers of a language. There's just so much to learn from people who are obviously still learning a language, because there is no, like, even the most fluent speakers will never be able to express themselves perfectly in a way that is always understandable exactly as they meant it to the other person. But yeah.
No, it's so true. And I think that, the imperfect or like mistakes are kind of what make poem or like writing in general just feel more tangible and real.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
thinking about tangibility in writing, when I was reading Hags, this one line really stood out to me, and I've kind of been thinking about it ever since. And it's my mother said my poems were touchable. So I kind of also like kudos to your mom, because that's like such a good description. But I just kind of want to talk maybe about more of the material elements of your poetry. Like, I guess for me, this touchableness, which is kind of created through your poems feel very sticky and like visceral, and like some of them, kind of feel like, that feeling when you get something stuck on your shoe, and like that's like the sensation of it in my brain. And I feel like this kind of carries across from your earlier work to some of your more recent poetry. And I guess, do you want to talk maybe about like the stylistic choices, or like how you use language and form to kind of create this touchableness, which is not a word, but is now.
um, yeah, I haven't like I myself have not revisited that essay Hags in a long time, so I like that you're bringing it up. Um, I remember like around the time my mom had said that my writing was very touchable, which I also loved. It was another electric moment. I had been reading about this Russian writer, this Russian like absurdist writer who died horribly in a labor camp, Daniel Carnes. He wrote, there was a compilation of his work that came out like in the early aughts, I think, called Today I Wrote Nothing. And he would write these like anti-stories. But he also was like, would write these really appealing children's stories that somehow like got past like the Russian censors and stuff. So he was like an interesting person. But he would do like a lot of things. He was also like a performance artist. He would like go into the middle of a crowd and like lie down until people started forming around him. But I remember I was reading like one of the essays in that book about his writing, and I think it was saying that he wanted his stories to have like tangible effects, like to be not as if one had thrown a rock into a window, shattering the glass, but he wanted his writing to literally be able to like shatter glass. I'm sure I'm getting this totally wrong. But I remember I was really affected by that. And also I was like, I don't understand. Like that sounds so pretentious and impossible. But I think what I was drawn to, I guess, is just the idea of writing that has like an effect on the reader. And I myself, I am drawn to that kind of writing. And it is totally valid. I also love writing that just soothes and lulls me, which is in and of itself an effect. But I love like when I was young, my mom would always tell me about like these books. Like I think that really long book about like incest and cousins in Chinese literature. Is it called like Dream of Red Chambers or something like that? She would always talk about like, she would be like, yeah, people literally died reading that book. And I'm like, how did they die reading that book? And she was like, well, they died of sadness. They died of crying too hard. And she was like, I'm not lying. Like people would just die of sadness.
Oh my God.
And I always thought that was like so dramatic, but I kind of, not that I liked it. I don't want anyone to die of sadness, but I felt like I'm drawn to these books and writings that have a physical effect on the reader. And for a long time, I think subconsciously, maybe less consciously, I wanted to do the same thing. I don't know if I'm still as interested in that, but definitely I'm sure there is some correlation between the feeling of powerlessness and effectivelessness that I had, an inability to make an effect on others that I felt as a young writer and a young person, and a great desire to affect others through my writing. But I think as I get older and feel more like I have agency over my own life and I can make an effect in my own life, I feel less of that need. But for sure, the writing that I did in the last 15 years, so much I wanted to have an effect.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt it. I even, I think one of, like, I think I remember reading your poems as like a younger person. And I think I was really like mind blown by the fact you wrote things like, ugh, and like just like long oohs and like just like moans and stuff. And I was like, this is wild that you can just write these utterances into poetry. But I think that for me, I think that kind of shaped my work a lot in the sense that I was like, whoa, you can like write anything you're thinking or feeling. And these things are actually, at readings, I love it when people do things like that because it takes me back to the body, which I guess is a thing we can never escape.
Mm.
So yeah, I think ugh is just like one of my favorite sounds because it says so much and it's like 3 letters unless it's drawn out. I
Yeah.
I did have like a specific poem that I wanted to talk about,
Sure.
which is TED Talk, which is kind of one of my favorite poems of yours. And I think it kind of diverges for me in terms of like the disgusting or whatever, because I feel like it's not typically disgusting, but it kind of
Mm.
talks about, there's kind of like a list of like disgusting and obscene habits of, I guess, like the upper 1%. I do have
Mm.
like a little snippet of it. So everyone's collecting coins in every interface. 1,000 identical posts about 2019 being the year of paper straws and reusable cups. Indigo dying from Kyoto is the new 36 hours in Tbilisi. And I guess the way I think is I also relate a lot of stuff to movies. So when I was reading this, I thought about the film Parasite. And this is a bit of a roundabout way to kind of share how I felt about it. But I was like, I feel like this poem and that film are like a subversion of disgust for me because it kind of it kind of has these figures of these wealthy people with very nice homes and aspirational lifestyles and habits. And I think I finished both that poem and that film being like, who is like truly disgusting? And, they might be like very clean and beautiful and like don't openly fart, but they are actually like the truly disgusting byproducts of the world.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I guess I just wanted to share that observation about that poem and I guess maybe get some of your thoughts on, I guess, disgustingness. And because I think it operates in some very explicit ways in your work, but I think this poem for me is an example of when it operates in a more implicit way.
Mm. Thank you so much for that reading. Yeah, I was sort of interested in, and I think it reflects also my own like travels through social class as I, publish books and get invited to spaces and even like the Wheeler Center and get invited to the kind of places where people who mm, see themselves as purveyors of culture or um, curators of people who have exquisite taste. I started to, I guess this is such a cliche, but I started to I entered the rarefied air of certain spaces that I had not entered before, that I had only seen maybe in movies or on TV, which are also created by those very same people. So they have like a very vested interest in not showing themselves in any way, but mostly positive, even when they're satirizing themselves. So it became, um, I just started to feel this cognitive dissonance between perhaps the ways in which people saw themselves as so noble and virtuous and so caring through these, I'm not going to say pointless acts, but kind of pointless acts of virtue that really you can take all the 5-minute showers you want, but if you're globe hopping and traveling like on planes,
Mm,
maybe stop doing that. And also the ways in which, I don't know, it became a type of currency that people who had the greatest access to currency and the greatest stores of currency. Like the currency of being noble was also like something that people who also had much assets and much wealth, the currency of being virtuous and noble was also something that people were trading and showing off. So I don't know. It just became something that I wasn't really, it just kind of flowed out of me. Um, and it was like a poem that had been commissioned by like a magazine. They wanted to like do this like segment on climate change with poetry, I think. And I I submitted the poem and they were like, well, we can't publish this because it's going to alienate our readership. And I was like,
Oh.
that's true. It is going to alienate your readership. Like, and I'm not trying to single out any one publication that, problems with institutions or problems with institutions across every institution. But it was just, I don't know, like it was just a way for me also to I also, this is not a question you asked, but I always thought people who gave TED Talks were kind of funny. Like it was just
Yes, 100%.
the concept of a TED Talk is really funny. I know they're not cool anymore, but there was a period of time where like they were really cool. They're really popping. People were giving a lot of TED Talks, important people. And I just thought like important people with nothing to lose and who are the last ones to be affected when the earth is burning down, telling other people how to live. I don't know, isn't that kind of gross and like silly and farcical?
I know what you mean about TED Talks because I guess the few times I've seen them, I always expect the camera to like pan down and they won't be wearing any shoes or something and they'll have like really like gross feet. Or like I just feel like there's something very there is something gross about it because it's also like really soundbitey and it's I never feel that like I don't feel like I come away from them with questions. And I think that, the most interesting conversations are the ones you walk away from with like so many questions and you're like, I need to Google all this stuff. Not that every TED Talk, I'm sure there's like, I haven't seen every TED Talk. I've barely seen 5. So I'm sure there's some really good ones, but it's the structure of it. It's so corporate, I guess, and weird. And there's the giant TED Talk sculpture, which wigs me out too because it looks kind of like the Netflix logo. But anyways, I digress.
I know. It's like the cult of expertise and whatnot. The point is I thought it would just be funny to like, I don't know, if there was such a thing as a lowercase TED Talk that was just full of stupidity and like there is no lesson. It's just admitting one's own limits and that's it. Nothing else. I don't know.
I love the idea of a lowercase TED Talk because I guess all lowercase is the opposite of professionalism.
Yeah.
I also was thinking a lot about, I guess, your use of profanity or like your approach towards profanity in your past work. Because I think I remember reading somewhere that like you weren't, when Dear Jenny, We Are All Fine came out, you weren't allowed to use the word asshole on air, even though it was in the poem you're reading. And I don't know what you were meant to use instead, like maybe butthole. Anyways, like, yeah, I guess. And I also think a lot about this like the study which shows that people think of people who swear a lot as more honest. And I kind of have been thinking about that. And I guess, I don't know, how do you feel about profanity, I guess, as like in like writing and like, I guess, what do you find interesting about it or, yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had something really deep to say, but I mean, like, what is more profane than like not valuing human life? What is like more profane than to be like a complete idiot about it than like committing genocide against like people, stealing people's land, displacing people, and coming up with every reason under the sun why that is legitimate and right. Like, what is more profane than, like, there's so many things that are absolutely like beyond the pale that disgust like me to my core. And I always felt like you're not allowed to be like hysterical and like out of control, like emotional about things that are hysterically awful and out of control awful. But then you are allowed to be like, oh my God, like, don't say that word, that 4-letter word. And I'm just like, who cares? Like, no, I don't care. I just simply don't care if this word offends you. Like, it just seemed that like that it was just always my feeling. And I don't know if that has changed at all for me. But also, like, going back to sort of what we were talking about in the beginning about, um, like having immigrant parents and parents who English isn't their first language and all of that, like, and language is like always changing, and language is like a living sort of it's like language is like alive. It changes when, like, the English language is not is the English language changed after colonialism. You know what I mean? Like, the English language changed the minute it was forced upon people who never knew it before. And from that point on, it would never be the same language that it was before that happened. And I just remember, I don't remember the asshole thing, but I do remember, like, I wasn't allowed to use like the word pussy or cunt. So I had to change all of that to twat because that was okay.
Oh.
Sounds really funny to keep saying twat, twat, twat. But then when Donald Trump, said you have to grab 'em by the pussy, it was like NPR was saying pussy, like New York Times was saying pussy. And I was like, oh, so when it's used in the most violent, hateful, sickening way possible, then like we have to print it in its full glory. But like when I'm just being cute and funny, I can't use it. What? Like, shouldn't it be the other way around? Anyway, I am absolutely like not saying that I'm like a great person or anything. I'm just saying, like, I'm using it quite harmlessly, in fact, and there's so many ways to use it that have been hateful. So why not have fun using it in a harmless, cute, fun, and enjoyable way?
Yeah. Yeah, I really it's like there's so many words to me that aren't, I guess, swear words that are kind of more offensive to me, and it's, it's kind of like, so much of the media uses they refuse to use the word genocide like it's a swear word.
Yeah,
Like there's so many
right.
like that kind of papering over of language to hide and obfuscate is way more offensive to me than someone throwing out like,
Totally.
I guess, pussy or cunt. And
Totally.
I also don't know if you're aware of the I guess the Australian propensity to use cunt in a very endearing way.
No.
I went to this sentence is going to sound so cooked, but I went to a Zoomer SoundCloud rap gig, which is just like a series of words I will,
Wonderful.
and they are these. One of them's called Lil Ket and the other's called Sydney Phillips, and they use the word cunt in their songs as a term of affection and endearment. They're like, and they called the audience so lovingly cunts, and like they have a song where they're like refer to everyone as cunts, and I just am like,
Oh,
they've made it really cute, these Zoomer SoundCloud rappers. But yeah, I guess my point is that
I love that.
a lot of swear words to me feel like endearing in some way. Like, I love calling my dog Toulouse my little bitch because I'm like, she is my bitch. um, but I
I
feel
love
like
that.
I'm digressing a little bit. But yeah, I really identify with that. Like swearing is not like an innately good thing, but it feels like it's an honest thing, and language is used in such dishonest ways.
So true. It is so, yeah, using language as a weapon to obfuscate and to justify the unjustifiable is the most profane thing of all to do, as you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a list of vernaculars that I find offensive, and like tax vocabulary is one of them because I'm like, so much of bureaucratic or administrative language is designed with gatekeeping in it. Whereas, like, everyone swears whether they do it publicly or
Yeah.
not. And everyone understands what those, like, it's kind of like, when you're in a different country and someone swears in their language, you can just tell it's like a swear word, even if, because of, like, I guess the gusto or the attitude with which it's said.
Totally.
I also, this is like diverging a little bit, but I actually really wanted to, I guess from the brief amount of time we spent together, I kind of remember talking about films with you, and I just like loved the discovery that I guess you love film, which, not everyone does. And I don't know if, I think I've maybe seen you talk about film. I think you wrote a piece, just a very brief bit about Apichatpong, one of Apichatpong's films. And I think I
Yeah.
was just super interested in, I guess, how maybe film feeds into your practice, or it's a pretty general question, but I just am really interested in your relationship with film.
Oh my gosh, I do remember when you and I met at that writer's retreat in Greece. Shout out to Rosemary's House.
Yeah.
It was so much fun to talk to you about film, and you have such an encyclopedic knowledge of film and such an appreciation. I just love it. I think of it as poetry.
Mm,
I love I love subtitles. Well, I use subtitles on everything I watch, even if it's like an American reality show, because I don't ever understand what anyone is saying. But I just love, this is so simple, but I love the look of a frame, of an image, of a moving image with words underneath it. Like it makes me feel incredible. And I like to save screenshots of movies that I love. And I just rewatched, I think we talked about this when we were in Greece, but I just rewatched Broker by Koreeda.
mm,
I don't know if you've seen that.
yeah.
Um, it's a really great movie. It didn't get as much attention in his previous movie, Shoplifters, but it's kind of like a similar theme. It's sort of like a road movie. It's also like a detective buddy film, but it's also like a running from the law film. But it's basically about this kind of ragtag group of people who come together to sell a baby, which sounds very dark. Um, but in the process, form these non-blood kind of connections of family. And I don't think this is a spoiler, but I'll say a spoiler in case somebody doesn't want to know anything about it. But there's like a scene where this guy who was abandoned as a child by his mom is talking to the mother who wants to abandon, who needs to abandon her child. And he says something to her like, my heart feels lighter when I'm around you. And she's like, why? And he's like, because like you, my mom may have had some unavoidable reason to abandon me. And I just can remember the image of them in the Ferris wheel and the sky behind them and the town behind them and those words. And they're just magic to me. It's a portal, it's alchemy, it's mystical, it's sort of like a holy, like illuminated text to me. I don't know why. It's just so simple and it like reaches me. I just love film. I just love seeing. a still moment and the words underneath it. It's just incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I've seen Broker and I loved it as well. I also loved that IU, who I guess is the mother who is a like a mega K-pop star, is
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
is it's funny seeing someone so like glamorous kind of, and she does an amazing job because she kind of has this
Yeah.
like deep melancholy in her being, even as a super famous K-pop star. But yeah, I love Koreeda because of I think Koreeda is just like an innately humanist filmmaker and just like really
Mm,
a lot of what I am drawn to about Koreeda's films are that it's about like the bonds that you choose to make or like the bonds that you
yeah.
make when you're kind of thrown together because you know sometimes the family bonds are just not strong or thick, but I think the beautiful thing about being a person
Totally.
in the world is that we exist around other people and we can find other people. And I think that,
Totally.
I love hearing you talk about film.
And also just to really quickly bring it back to the penguin and toilets. And I feel like Koreeda, he's always depicting these people who have been forgotten and thrown away
Mm,
by society, who are deemed broken and like almost losers. And he just infuses like so much divine beauty into these people in a way that's not forced or not at all like corny. It just feels real. Like these are glorious people. And I just love that. It's like I love, yeah, like you're saying, the bonds between people who are not necessarily blood family, but I don't know. There's something like glorious about like everything and everyone.
yeah, I think we don't have much time left, but I think there's something like, I guess it's like losers by what standard they have so many things of beauty like love and each other and you know, when Corita does a lot of like scenes of like sharing meals together, and you're like, they have like true
Mm,
intimacy that a lot of winners by the standard of this world don't have.
totally.
I might just finish this conversation with like a really, I guess, rapid fire question, but I kind of guess in
Okay.
like
I'm not good
maybe
at that.
I know it's a bit putting you on the spot. I'm sorry, but I guess maybe
No, let's do it.
three of your current obsessions, or like they can be writerly, whatever. I feel like life bleeds into writing, so yeah.
Three of my current obsessions. Um, I'm obsessed with the faux moi Reddit subreddit.
Oh yeah.
Um, it's it can get very dark though. Um, I am also right now, what else am I obsessed with? These I'm really bad at these rapid fire things. I'm obsessed with the movie Petite Maman by Celine Sciamma. I think that's her name.
Ooh.
And I'm obsessed with I don't know what it's called in English. I think it's called like water spinach or choy. It's kind of like a leafy
Oh,
green. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's really good.
I actually call it water spinach, so I'm like I'm so aware of what it
Water
is.
spinach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot with rapid fire questions. And thank you so much for your time today. I really loved talking about like pooping and like life, which is connected to poop with you. And just to close, like in addition to thanking you, to all of you joining us, to Liminal, and of course the Wheeler Center for hosting this poopy conversation. Before we go, I just want to mention that the bookseller for Liminal Festival is Amplify Books, Australia's only online bookstore specializing in BIPOC books. I encourage you to purchase Jenny Zhang's books through this wonderful independent bookseller. They also have a wealth of other amazing books, so definitely please check them out. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.